save it for the end. My name is Dick Segreto, and I presume you can hear me now, correct? Today's presentation, not a presentation, today's message is anti-Semitism and the Hollywood moguls. Anti-Semitism is defined by the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, and that's a lot of words. They define anti-Semitism as that there are many people that have hatred towards Jews. And that hatred is manifested in verbal abuse and physical violence towards Jews and other individuals that may be perceived to be sympathetic to Jews. That violence is against the places where they live, places where they work, their businesses, their institutions, and religious facilities. Now, the Jewish people have been subjected to anti-Semitism and hatred and abuse for over 2,000 years. But they've been very resilient and they've survived. The Hollywood moguls. Many of the Hollywood moguls were born in America, and many of them immigrated from European countries to America. They all wanted to live the American dream, experience the American dream, and to assimilate into American culture. But there was always resistance and restrictions that they had to deal with. There were quotas at colleges and universities and medical schools. They were always facing difficult times. They came from poor to moderate income families. They were very industrious and very ambitious. The industries that they found that were accepted in and they became very successful in was the various retail trades. But most of the movie moguls came from the clothing industry. And the clothing industry in the late 1890s and early 1900s, they were all operating in New York garment district. And they were very successful. During that same period of time, Thomas Edison invented the motion picture camera. And he had invented it, and then he was able to charge royalty fees for film producers who were using his equipment. All the films in the early days of films were produced in New York and New Jersey. But those film producers found that the wide open spaces of Southern California, particularly Hollywood, was ideal because of its temperate climate and wide open spaces to film westerns and adventure films. They also realized, hey, we're in California, we're not going to pay Thomas Edison any of his royalty fees. And they got away with it. The film industry during the silent film age, where most of the producers of film worked in their garages. There was only one major studio during the silent film era. And it wasn't owned by Jews. It was founded by Charlie Chaplin, Mary Pickford, Douglas Fairbanks, and W.D. Griffith. Back in New York in 1890s and early 1900s, where did Jewish people really survive and make money at? Entertainment. That's what they were good at. Minstrels, clowns, singers, dancers, comedians, actors, actresses. They performed in circuses and minstrel shows, on stage, burlesque houses, and vaudeville. Some of the great entertainers of that time were the Marx Brothers, Fanny Brice, Eddie Cantor, Al Jolson. And you're going to hear about all of those names in just a minute, because they were all entered in the motion picture industry. Those performers and many other Jewish performers laid the groundwork and paved the way for those Jewish moguls, those entrepreneurs, to seek out the film industry, because it was in the beginning. Guess what? When they went to the film industry, there were no restrictions. There were no quotas. In fact, they were welcome there. The Hollywood studios. All of the major Hollywood studios were founded by Jewish entrepreneurs. Columbia Studios were the Coen brothers, Harry and Jack. The Warner Brothers were Polish Jewish immigrants, founded Warner Brothers Studios. Fox Studios was William Fox. RKO Studios was founded by David Sarnoff. Paramount Studios was founded by Adolf Zucker. And the granddaddy of them all, the biggest, which became the biggest and the most powerful studio in Hollywood, is MGM. It was founded by Louis B. Mayer, Samuel Goldwyn, and Marcus Lowe. Those studios were thriving at that time. They were making many films. And it enabled those Jewish entrepreneurs to finally be able to assimilate into American culture. And with all those films produced, they were able to fulfill their vision of the American dream. Backlash. In the 1930s, with the rise of Nazism in Germany and in Europe, and this may be a surprise to some of you, and the United States, there was a big Nazi party involvement in the United States during the 30s. Many Jewish entertainers from Europe immigrated to America, to Hollywood particularly. Hedy Lamarr, film directors Billy Wilder and Michael Curtiz, and actors like Peter Lorre and Paul Heinrich. And there were many American Jewish actors that were fearful of any backlash, that had very Jewish names, so they changed their names to assimilate into the film industry and not be persecuted. People like Nathan Birnbaum was George Burns. Bernard Schwartz was Tony Curtis. And Doris Persky was Lauren Bacall. And there were many, many others. This is a binder I have that has all the Jewish actors and actresses, and it's about 10 pages long, and it gives the decades that they were born in. Anyway, at that time, the heads, the studio heads, the owners, decided not to have any Jewish characters on the silver screen. And during World War II, they decided not to have the word Holocaust in any films for fear of backlash. It wasn't until the 1950s that the first Jewish characters were on the silver screen. Films that you're probably very familiar with: Diary of Anne Frank, Moses in the Ten Commandments, Ben-Hur in the film Ben-Hur. It wasn't until the 1960s that we started seeing strong Jewish characters on the silver screen, like Rosalind Russell in the film Majority of One. Let's not forget Barbara Streisand portraying Fanny Brice in Funny Girl. And by the way, she won an Oscar that night at the Oscar celebration for Best Actress for that film. What you probably didn't know is that was a major milestone. This event never happened before that evening and never happened since. There was a tie for a lead role by an actress in a motion picture, and that second actress to walk home with that Oscar was Katharine Hepburn in the film Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. Jewish culture began to appear in the 60s and 70s. Films like Fiddler on the Roof. Films like Gene Wilder and the Frisco Kid. And Richard Dreyfuss in the film The Apprenticeship of David Dudley Kravitz. And during the 60s and 70s, there was Jewish entertainers were thriving. And there were many Jewish comedians entering the scene. And in 1979, Time magazine ran a poll, and they wanted to find out how many Jewish comedians what was the percentage of Jewish comedians? And that was over 80%. Comedians like Don Rickles, Jackie Mason, Buddy Hackett, Rodney Dangerfield, Mike Nichols, Elaine May, and Joan Rivers. I could go on and on. In those days, I had every one of their albums. I used to do impressions of Jackie Mason. He talked like this. I don't know if you know who Jackie Mason is, but that's how he talked. There was a landmark film in I skipped something. There were many Jewish entertainers that people like Mel Brooks, Carl Reiner, Woody Allen, and Neil Simon. They began to produce and direct films that was a reflection of their own Jewish culture onto the screen and was very successful. But in 1947, there was a landmark film. And it was Gentleman's Agreement. Gentleman's Agreement was about the rise of anti-Semitism in post-World War II in America. The plot line is a news reporter played by Gregory Peck was doing a story investigating that, and he posed as a Jew to get more realistic what was going on. That film and other films that were produced during that time was bringing the awareness of the anti-Semitism at that time. And this is kind of not off the cuff. This wasn't part of my speech. I'm just going to improvise this. And if you remember the McCarthy hearings and the anti-communist hearings, they went after the Hollywood people. They were going after the Jews because they I don't know why, but they were particularly going after the Jewish community, writers, producers, directors. The film Gentleman's Agreement did very well at the box office, and it did very well at the Oscars. It was nominated for 8 Academy Awards and won 3. Best Picture, Best Director for Jewish director Elia Kazan, and Best Supporting Actress for Celeste Holm. The golden age of Hollywood. Wait a minute. You ain't heard nothing yet. That was a 1929 film produced by Warner Brothers, starring Al Jolson and the Jazz Singer. And that was a major milestone in film history because it was the first talkie film ever produced. And that film marked the beginning of the golden age of Hollywood. And it lasted for over 20 years. And that was my favorite time of those films. And during those over 20 years, there were 7,500 films produced. 83 million people were going to the motion picture theater an average of once a week. And that was during the Great Depression and World War II. The studios were thriving at that time. They were giving audiences a wide range of films to help them survive and get through those difficult times. There's lavish musicals, epic costume adventures, westerns, comedy, drama, love stories, and yes, even animated films like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Audiences laughed at the comedies of W.C. Fields, Marx Brothers, and Bob Hope. And they fell in love with a curly-haired little girl named Shirley Temple. The golden age of Hollywood was known for its glamour, its glitter, its romance, its elegance. It was a time celebrities were created and legends were born. And Ed Sullivan, a noted columnist reporter, wanted to find out who the king and queen of Hollywood was. So he ran a poll in his newspaper column. Over 2 million people voted. In 1938, the king and queen of Hollywood, Clark Gable and Myrna Loy. The studio system. The studio system was instituted by those entrepreneurs, the owners of the studios. They wanted to be able to keep tabs and keep control of cost and production and everything. So all the studios had hired all the employees of their studios had to sign a contract, and they were making a weekly salary. That's everybody, actors, actresses, directors, producers, cinematographers. They all were employees of the studio. And then to keep tabs and control of distribution costs, the major studios owned all of the motion picture theaters across the country. And those studio heads relied on their producers to come up with film projects. Film projects like the film producers like Irving Thalberg, David O. Selznick, and Darryl Zanuck. But it all came crashing down in 1948. There was a Supreme Court ruling, Paramount versus United States, and the Supreme Court ruled that Hollywood had a monopoly on production in theaters. So they made them sell off their theaters. And the theaters, actually, it didn't end until really the mid-1950s. The American Film Institute is an organization that ranks and rates films. They have their top 100 list of all times. And in the top 5 films of their top 100 list, 3 of them are from the golden age of Hollywood. Number 1, Citizen Kane. Number 2, Casablanca. Number 3, Godfather. Number 4, Gone with the Wind. And number 5, Lawrence of Arabia. And the American Film Institute also came up with 1 year. There's 1 year in the entire history of the film industry that created more of the greatest films of all time than any other year in film history. And that year was 1939. Films like Gone with the Wind, The Wizard of Oz, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, Ninotchka, Hunchback of Notre Dame, Stagecoach, Goodbye, Mr. Chips. Okay, folks, in closing, I'm going to share with you a story about the first Jewish president of the United States. And it's a phone conversation that he has with his mother, who he's inviting to the White House to celebrate Purim, a Jewish holiday. And the conversation goes like this. Ma, I'd like to invite you to the White House to celebrate Purim. Oh, but son, I didn't know. I got to pack. I got to make all those arrangements and take care of all my affairs. No, Ma, I'm going to send someone over to help you pack, take care of all the arrangements and all your affairs. Oh, but son, I don't know. I got to drive to the airport. I got to find a place to park. I don't know. Mom, I'm the president of the United States. I'm going to send a limo to pick you up and take you to the airport. Oh, son, I got to deal with those X-ray machines and people searching me and standing in those long lines. Mom, the limo will take you to the airport. You'll board Air Force One, and they'll bring you to the White House. Oh, but I don't want to be in any trouble. Where would I stay? Mom, the White House has 21 bedrooms. No problem. No problem. Oh, I don't know, son. Mom, listen. We really would love to have you come to Washington to celebrate Pearl. Okay, I'll come. She hangs up. She picks up the phone, calls her best friend, see you. See you. I'm going to celebrate Purim with my son. No, not the doctor, the other one. Thank you.